Hi, everyone. We're back, and today we have Graham Balch, the CEO of ZeroMar, joining us from NorCal, San Rafael. So, Graham, thank you for joining.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. So, ZeroMar is at the forefront of marine sustainability by converting recreational and commercial vessels from diesel to electric motors. So, tell us a bit about your journey and how you founded the company.
Sure. So I was a yacht broker, and back in 2017, 2018, if y'all remember, Tesla was kind of hitting the market at that time. Now they're universal, but back then there was a big argument as to whether or not you know people want electric cars, and dealers were the ones blocking electric cars from being sold, because the car dealerships realize as soon as electric cars make it, a lot of their revenue from servicing engines that break goes away, right? And you face a similar dynamic in the marine sector. So in the car world, the bottleneck, the thing preventing the electric car, which American manufacturers were making, from reaching American customers, was the dealership that was standing in the way. And in the yachting world, it was the same dynamic. You had manufacturers willing to make electric boats, wanting to make electric boats. And you had customers asking for electric boats, and you had yacht brokers saying, "No way in heck, this is a bad idea. You're going to kill yourself out on the water," right? And so I started ZeroMar back in 2019 with the idea of making it feasible for people to have access to purchase an electric boat. And so started it, bought some, signed some distribution agreements with two very good boat makers in Europe, Salona Yachts and Arcona Yachts. Arcona had just won European Yacht of the Year that year, or the year before. And then something funny happened in February of 2020. Little thing called COVID. So I flew over to Europe with a crew, and we picked up the sailboats and sailed them back across the Atlantic Ocean. Um, it was very different and also incredible to be sailing that far in an electric boat. Like I would never do a long distance sail in a diesel boat ever again. The experience is just so much better, so much more natural. Um, in the ways that you would expect, from not having to breathe in the fumes, not having to hear that engine, to the fact that, dolphins are very curious about the sound of an electric motor. And there were many times where we would have, 20, 30, 100 dolphins swimming with us for an hour because they were curious about the sound. So we brought the boats over, and right as we got to the United States, the Annapolis and Newport boat shows were canceled. Um, and so it definitely made a little bit of a difficult start, because what people reverted to in COVID was going to what they knew, right? So boat sales went up, but it was known brands like Beneteau, Jeanneau, etc. The smaller brands, the new trends, actually didn't do very well in COVID. So we sold the boats. We didn't sell a lot of boats, but we, sold enough to make it by. Along the way, picked up some awards like, best new green boat at the Newport Boat Show. And then, we started hearing about this CARB, California Air Resources Board. This California Air Resources Board is doing this stuff out in California. Graham, you got to look into it. I mean, you're out there, go look into it. So I did. And essentially, the California Air Resources Board was putting forth a regulation that would require short-run ferries that go less than 3 miles to be electric, as well as new excursion vessels, so like a whale watching vessel. And so we started talking to a number of the folks who were about to be affected by that. And, to make a very long story short, we ended up helping a number of clients get $47 million in grant funding to convert their ferry vessels, fishing vessels, excursion vessels to electric. Um, uh, and going forward, it has been so much harder than I anticipated because right now, and I sorry this, I can't have this conversation without slightly touching the third rail of politics. We are caught between the disinterest in clean energy and electrification of DC and the incredible bureaucracy of California, where it takes an average of 15 months to sign an agreement that was pre-published. And, you know, the first invoice we're getting paid took 5 months to get paid. You can't serve these projects with that kind of administrative challenge, and you can't do projects when the funding is pulled by the federal government. So I definitely like, if anybody's between a rock and a hard place, it's ZeroMar.
Oh,
And so
geez.
we are trying to execute the projects that we have in California. And we absolutely believe in the mission of marine electrification. Um, but we realize that there's a lot of obstacles in our way that we weren't expecting that we have to get through.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that California is actually a problem with their whole electric movement
Yep.
for
So the
sustainability.
initiative is there, the will is there, the desire is there. But I don't know if you've read Ezra Klein's book Abundance. Um, it basically talks about things like, in the Biden infrastructure bill, there was $40 billion for rural broadband, but of that 40 billion, which was passed in 2021, so very early in the administration, of that 40 billion, what percent of it do you happen to know was spent on rural broadband?
Oh, wow.
0%. Because it was so difficult to get through the administrative hurdles that nobody could do it. And so we, find our, and this is what the book Abundance talks about, that, there's an abundance of funding and there's abundance of desire, but it's not getting done, and even Gavin Newsom hosted Ezra Klein on a podcast to talk about it. And he, expressed frustration about the fact that it's difficult to get things done in California or, in more liberal areas. But we're still running into that problem of it's very hard to get stuff done. And so, on one side, it's hard to get stuff done. On the other side, uh, we're the enemy. So that's where we are.
Yeah, wow, that's a lot. So, how easy do you think that adoption would be?
So that's a great question. I think there, if you think about all the vessels that are out there operating, recreational and commercial, there's some low hanging fruit, which should have been electric 10 years ago because it's just a better experience. Boats that do, tours of the San Francisco Bay, glass bottom boats out of Long Beach that take people to tour the Long Beach Harbor, right? Um, the boats that putt around San Diego Harbor, the short run ferries out of that are run by Flagship cruises out of San Diego. These are easy electric use cases. Um, and and I think that we need to start there because there's no sense in trying to tackle the 800-pound gorilla of transatlantic, trans-Pacific, cargo shipping, because that is the hardest use case. So let's start where it's easiest, and those use cases are absolutely doable with today's technology. Um, there are some challenges such as, and I'm going to say something a little provocative, but the Coast Guard safety regulations actually make commercial electric boats more dangerous than safe. And Well, I'll give you a great example. Um, I was watching a show last week called 9/11 Nashville. I don't know if you've seen it on ABC. And this rookie fireman was, had a car that was on fire, and he's like, "Oh, it's a lithium battery, so I can't put water on that." Well, yes, even a rookie fireman knows you don't put water on a lithium ion battery fire because water reacts and makes it worse. And what the Coast Guard requires is a water misting solution that deluges the battery compartment with water, thereby taking one cell, which has entered thermal runaway, and making it every cell in every battery module that's entering thermal runaway. And all of a sudden, a small problem is a giant problem. And they do that because they don't know what other alternatives to employ. But there are, if you think about the tetrahedron of fire, right? There's four things required for fire to occur. Heat, oxygen, fuel, and chemical reactions, right? So all you need to do is get rid of one of the other four, right? And so water is trying to abate the heat, but why not use CO2 and keep all the oxygen from being present so that you are stopping fire that way without making the problem worse, which is what we do in our systems.
Okay. So that's one of the many benefits. What else other than, stating the obvious, better for the environment and such, that electric has against the traditional?
Sure. So one of the contributors for seasickness is breathing in diesel fumes. People, so it helps reduce seasickness. Asthmatic people are affected by diesel fumes. And when you're going out into nature, you know, power boaters don't get to experience what I'm about to say, but sailors, if you ask a sailor, what's the best point of your sail? Many will say the moment you turn the engine off and you just enjoy this peace and serenity of being out there and having the wind power your boat, not having all that noise. And one of our phrases is, well, why wait? Why not have that experience from the second you get on the boat to the second you get back to the dock? Um, it's enjoyment, it's less seasickness, it's better for your health, especially for those who are asthmatic. Um, and it's an interesting thing. A lot of power boats, for example, have a generator to power, say, an air conditioning unit, especially in Florida. Well, if you had an electric boat with a diesel generator, right, so that you're using diesel fuel for some of those longer distances, you can have that generator not kick in at night at all and have the air conditioner run completely off batteries. And then when you wake up in the morning, you run that generator, top off the batteries, and you haven't had to listen to that generator all night long as you're trying to sleep. So there's so many ways in which uh, an electric creates a better experience. And there is one, well, two, but one real limiting factor as to why electric is difficult in the marine sector, and that's the density of energy storage.
Okay.
So, a kilogram of diesel has 12,400 watts. Now, there's some efficiency loss because a lot of it goes to heat, so you're left with about 30%. So you're really looking at about 3,800 watts per kilogram of available energy to the engine from diesel fuel. For a lithium-ion battery, it's 190. It's 20 times less energy dense. And because
Wow.
boats take more energy to go 1 mile than a car or even a semi truck, you need more energy. And if the energy density is 20 times less in a lithium ion battery compared to diesel fuel, that's your biggest obstacle. And that's why the short use cases are great, but the long use cases with today's technology are not possible.
Gotcha. So, what kind of boat did you sail across the Atlantic with?
So we were on two sailboats. One was a Salona 38 and one was a Arcona 43, and they both had ocean volt electric motors. And it was it was really interesting. Obviously, I knew I was on an electric boat, but the first time it really dawned on me how different an electric boat was is, we just come down from Sweden and we're in the English Channel outside of London, and there's a huge tidal change and current change with the Thames River. And there wasn't very much wind at all that day. It was like, I don't know, a knot and a half, 2 knots of wind. And when the current was going against us, we couldn't sail because it wasn't enough wind to overcome the current. So now we're used to just turning on the iron jenny, is what sailors call the engine, the iron gennaker. But we didn't have an iron gennaker, or we did, but we wouldn't have been able to use it long enough, right? So we did what mariners did for centuries, millennia. We dropped anchor, stayed in position for 6 hours, waited for the currents to shift, and then resumed sailing. And that's what, mariners have done for millennia. And at first I was pretty frustrated. And then I realized, this is actually what boating is supposed to be. We're supposed to be one with the ocean, not, work against it.
So how long did it take you to get from point
Well,
A
it
to
took
point B?
longer. Yeah, it took longer because of logistics and meeting up with the other boat. And we took the long way, and it was in hurricane season. And yes, we had to outrun a hurricane on to get into Bermuda. So all told, the sailing was maybe 7 weeks, but that's from Sweden down to the Canary Islands over to Bermuda, Bermuda to Deltasville, and then Deltasville up to Annapolis.
That's a journey. Yeah. What an experience there. And you didn't get caught up in the Bermuda Triangle. No one has stories about that anymore.
No, no, we were just happy to outrun the hurricane and make it in, and get it into a hurricane safe mooring. So,
Very
you know,
cool.
that was our focus.
Nice. So you mentioned funding. That's a big deal. How does that work?
Right. So in the beginning of any market, right? If you think about the calculator in 1972, it was like $350. That same calculator today is $4, right? So, in the beginning of any market, you need government funding. And this isn't, just electrification, calculators, airplanes, electricity, you name it, you know. And so we are early on in marine electrification. I mean, there's less than 10 commercial boats that are electric in the United States. There's probably less than 1,000 boats. And we're dealing with, tens of thousands of commercial truck vehicles and millions of electric cars. So it's way further behind, and we haven't reached economies of scale yet. So, a marine electric propulsion system in a recreational vessel probably is twice as much as a diesel engine replacement. And in a commercial vessel, because of all the Coast Guard regulations and the amount of batteries that you need, it's more like 5 to 10 times more expensive. And so it's not unreasonable to expect a ferry operator to say, yeah, I'll pay 5 to 10 times more for something. And that's where, as a market is initiating and developing, you need government funding to make it cost comparable to the fossil fuel alternative. And I think the other aspect of it is that the future of our transportation in all sectors is electric, right? And China has been really smart and taken advantage of the electrification of cars to go from not producing any cars to being one of the global players in car production, because they took advantage of the electric. And you can see their percentage of the global market expanding as electrification has gained traction. And they're doing a lot of research on increasing the energy density of lithium ion batteries and other forms of research. And they've used that to get into an industry that they had no place in. And the United States should be leading car electrification, marine electrification, because this is going to be the backbone of 21st century, 22nd century manufacturing, right? This is how we, establish ourselves as leaders in manufacturing. But without that research component, we are falling behind to Europe and China on the manufacturing of electric propulsion systems, on research and development of, lithium ion batteries. And, if I want the United States to be a strong nation with, built on manufacturing, and if we're not investing in the future of transportation sectors, we're causing America to fall behind. And that frustrates me.
Yeah, and that's huge, right? And you can't be the only one that's pulling for this. So, do you have advocates or even competitors at that's trying to accomplish the same things that you are?
Yeah, so I think there's a few folks who have pursued electrification in different ways. Um, um, and there's organizations that are trying to advocate for marine electrification. There's conferences that focus on zero emission ferries. Um, but I would say that um, it's not enough of a voice. So if the electric car world has probably had some $100 billion invested in electric cars. The electric airline industry, each time somebody tries to make a play there, it's a minimum $1 billion entry, and there's four of them have done that, so that's $4 billion invested in electric airplane ventures. And there was a big one up in Washington, which I'm not going to name, which was a lost cause. That was like $150 million, but it was uh, frankly never going to work. But other than that, the investment in marine electrification in the United States is probably, in the maybe 10 to 20, maybe 30 million. And when you're looking at these other transportation sectors, there's no way it's going to succeed until we have, if not equal, at least, on the same scale of investment, so that we can develop economies of scale, uh, create a value product based on that economies of scale, and help boaters experience the peace of being on the water without the fumes and noise. I mean, you've got safety issues. I mean, there's a lot of safety issues beyond the engine out at sea, right?
Mhm.
But I think the safety, you know in cars, there's not enough stats in boats yet, but in cars, out of every 100,000 cars, 1,500 gas cars burn. And out of every 100,000 electric cars, only 25 electric cars burn. It's
Okay.
significantly less. Now, those fires are, hotter and worse, but the incidents, look, if you have a diesel engine or an electric, motor and batteries burning on a boat, you're in trouble either way. So it doesn't matter how bad it is on a boat. It just, if it happens, it's bad.
Yeah.
And so I'd rather go with the engine that has, 25 out of 100,000 burn instead of 1,500 out of 100,000.
So likewise. Oh, that's yeah, a really fun fact for everyone to digest there. So what do you think the outlook is for you guys in the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, we have projects that we are working on to, electrify, for example, the first fishing vessel in the United States, the first fiberglass commercial vessel in the United States, ferries. But I think what we've had to do is really slow down our growth, our projections, um, uh, and we're looking at it not as a growth strategy, but a survival strategy, because we've got to outlast the bureaucracy of California and the animosity of Washington.
Yikes. Well, that is a lot to deal with, Graham. I don't even know what to say. But hey, just keep pushing because it is going to happen eventually, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
All
Well,
right.
Megan, when you're up in the San Francisco area, let me know and I will take you out on an electric boat.
I would love that. I'm sure it feels almost like a floating experience, if you will. I can imagine it now.
You can come have the experience and then you can tell folks on your podcast about it.
Will do. Absolutely. I'll take you up on that. So, this is a different arena of tech. Do you guys utilize any other like AI?
Really good question. I would say the marine sector is further behind other sectors on technology, something you've probably noticed.
Mhm.
Um, I think that there's a lot of opportunities to utilize AI in, you know, even thinking about diesel vessels, fuel optimization, you know, um, fleet optimization, knowing what's happening on your vessel. But when you're looking at AI, right? There's kind of three things that you need. One, you need a large language model. Two, you need algorithms that access that large language model. And three, you need a lot of data input, and so if you think about it in terms of boats, that's sensors, right? And so there's been a lot of companies that have developed massive amounts of sensors for, everything from they put sensors in the ceilings of office buildings to detect, where people are moving, using their heat map, and so they can track employee productivity, but that's all possible because of sensors, right? And the sensors feed into a large language model, and then algorithms use those data inputs to query that large language model. But in the marine sector, what's really missing is the sensors. You don't have enough data inputs to take advantage of any large language model or any algorithms written to query it. And I know nothing else about AI, so don't ask another AI question. Um, if we had enough sensors and we could collect data, in the marine sector, I've even tried to talk to the California Air Resources Board about this. I said, look, you guys could put a sensor on every boat in California and collect all the data you need automatically rather than charging every boater, $1,000 to pay for your regulations and enforcement. You just put a sensor on there, collect all the data, and you don't need to do all this, enforcement efforts and, regulation that people are having a hard time complying with because they don't understand it. Just put a sensor on, you're going to know exactly how many emissions, not one sensor, right? But just put a sensor package and a small little, Raspberry Pi on every boat, and you can get all the data you need to determine exactly what the emissions are from the marine sector and little tweaks that can reduce it. And also, what are your best use cases for electric? And where do you need to invest in the clean engines so that you're actually getting the cost benefit out of it instead of forcing somebody to spend money on an engine? Literally, there are some folks in the marine sector that are required to get, a new $80,000 engine, and that engine is limited to 20 hours a year. That does not make sense, right? So let's figure out, where are we going to get the most benefit from
To do
spending.
something, yeah.
And I brought this up to the California Resources Board, and they said, yeah, we're not going to do another emissions inventory for another 5 to 10 years. So why don't you tell us about it then?
No way.
Kid you not.
Good times, and this is your everyday life pretty much.
It has been difficult. Um, but if you've ever been on an electric boat, you know how incredible it is. And everybody says that this is the future. And I believe it's good for the marine sector. I think it's good for our oceans. I mean, 92% of global warming goes into our oceans, right? That we mariners are supposed to be protecting. So I think this is something all of us are responsible for doing. And I believe in it. And I believe in the quality of the experience. And I'm pretty stubborn and I'm not going to give up no matter how hard it is. But it is a lot harder than I expected the journey to be. We've been a company for over 6 years.
Okay. Okay. And was it this hard starting as it
Well,
is?
remember, we got started and then COVID hit. So, yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, you know, um, I think I would take COVID over, the rock and hard place of California and Washington. But, maybe I shouldn't have just said that because I'm going to get booed out of town.
I'll be there with you. I'll anticipate the pitchforks, but
There we
it
go.
together.
Yeah. Yeah. My hope for anybody watching this, right, is go follow Sailing Uma. They've been sailing around the world on an electric boat for 10 years. Um, um, Look into it. It may not be right for you now, but learn about it. Go experience what it's like if you can, so that you know what you work during the week, you paid a lot of money for a boat, you want to enjoy it. Why not enjoy it more? And look into, all right, what does it take for it to work for me economically and functionally? Um, just looking into it, learning about it, being part of the conversation. Telling us why it doesn't work for you is just as good as telling us why it works for you. You know, but look into it, learn about it, and pay attention is what I would ask anybody watching this to do.
Very good. Well, there you have it. Well, thank you so much for sharing and go Tigers. Yeah, let me know whenever.
Go dogs! Go dogs! Go Aztecs! Go Aztecs!
All right. That'll work for me too. We could
There we
join
go.
forces there. Well, have a safe journey to San Diego and you guys have fun.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Megan.
Of course. All right.
Cheers.
Thank you so much. Bye.